Now let us talk about the retainers, the direct retainers. So direct retainers, which are also called as clasp, I told you this is a component that gives retention to your processes. Direct retainer or a clasp assembly. When we talk about clasp assembly, it's not only the direct retainer, but a clasp assembly, it consists of the retentive arm, the reciprocal arm, the rest seat, the minor connector. They're all the component of the clasp assembly. If you look at the picture here, I have done some marking. So the one you have are the retentive arm. So retentive arm is on the buccal side or the labial side. Then opposing to the retentive arm, you have the reciprocal arm. Reciprocal arm is the one that will be on the lingual or the palatal side. You have to remember the retentive arms, they are flexible. They have retentive tip tapered in the 1/3 and they engage the undercut area. They are the flexible one. While the reciprocal arm, which is on the lingual or palatal side, it is straight, it is rigid, it is non-flexible. And it is mainly in the non-undercut area. It is present in the occlusal 1/3. Now, so if you look at the design of this processes, right? So this is a mid-palatal strap design, and you can see this is called as a circumferential clasp. That is a very preferred clasp because it's engaging more than 180 degree of the two circumference. This one is the rest here, the occlusal rest. This one, which faces the facial or the buccal side, is the retentive clasp arm. And this is the reciprocal clasp arm. The function of the reciprocal clasp arm is to reciprocate or balance the action of the retentive arm when it is active, because retentive arm has to be passive all the time. Only time it becomes active when vertical dislodging forces are acting on the processor, like for example when you're eating sticky food. But at that time when retentive arm becomes active, you don't want orthodontic tooth movement to happen. For that, we have the reciprocal clasp arm, which is going to balance that action so that your tooth is not moving orthodontically. Now let us see this classification. So direct retainers or the class, they divide into intracoronal retainers and the extracoronal retainers. So intracoronal retainer we discuss more about when we do the prosthos and the FPD, while the extracoronal retainer that we do in RPD here, the Suprabulge example, you have an embrasure clasp, which is a Suprabulge clasp. You can see the picture and you can see how it is approaching the undercut from above the height of contour or over the height of contour. They are also called as occlusally approaching clasp. Then we have the circumferential clasp or the Akers clasp I told you and I showed you in the picture. That's a very prominent design we have. Now you have another class which is Suprabulge or occlusally approaching. That's a combination class. And why it is called as a combination class? Because you're combining two different metals here. The retentive arm is made up of flexible wrought wire and the reciprocal arm is made up of rigid cast metal. Now another group of clasp that you have a infrabulge clasp. In the infrabulge class we have the I-bar, T-bar, modified T-bar, modified I-bar, and this is a very important design we have that is called as the RPI system, which has the I-bar. R stands for mesial rest, T stands for proximal plate and I stands for I-bar. Mainly for Kennedy class 1, class 2 or distal extension cases, we are doing the RPI design. So if you look at the picture here, this is the mesial rest here. This is the proximal rest that approaches from the distal lingual embrasure area, the proximal plate, and this is the I-bar. So you can see this I-bar like a L shape. It's approaching the undercut here from below the height of contour. And you have more requirement for aesthetics in the patient with the high caries index. You go for infrabulge design, right? Because they're covering less of the tooth structure. The chances of caries become less. And also, since they're approaching gingivally, the aesthetics is better with the I-bar design, with the infrabulge design. What is the main advantage of the RPI system is RPI system with the rest and the proximal plate will provide the reciprocation so that when the occlusal forces are acting on the processes, it will disengage the I-bar and the plate away and make it drop down into the tissue gingivally. And what is the advantage of RPI design? When the forces are falling, the occlusal forces are falling on the processes, RPI design with the mesial rest and proximal plate will provide the reciprocation. It will disengage the I-bar away and drop it down gingivally and mesially so that the forces are not falling on the abutment tooth. They are falling on the denture bearing mucosa where they are best tolerated. That is going to prevent the damage to the abutment tooth and make it sure that the forces are uniformly distributed. You can see some of the design here. So this is a circumferential clasp. I told you the Akers clasp. You can clearly see approaching the undercut from above the height of contour. It is satisfying all the principle of clasp assembly, which include the stability, retention, support, reciprocation, and very important encirclement property, that is more than 180-degree circumference of the tooth, it is engaging, and passivity. And this eye bar you can see here. So eye bar is the one that we use for the RPI design. I already explained you the RPI design, better aesthetic and minimum interference with the natural tooth contour. This is one more circumferential, Suprabulge clasp design we have, that's called as ring clasp. And this ring clasp is used in case of tipped or tilted molars and encircle almost the entire tooth from its point of origin. This one is called as the fish hook or the hairpin or reverse action. It's a simple circlet clasp. Upper part of retainer arm is rigid here and lower is tapered and flexible. So most important is the indication. It is indicated when the retainer clasp must engage an undercut adjacent to the occlusal rest or to the edentulous space. Thank you.